This video is sponsored by Squarespace.
Can I ask you something? Yes? Do you like me?
Adolescence is a 4-part show on Netflix about a 13-year-old boy called Jamie who murders a girl, I think 14 or 15 from his school, called Katie. I think that's pretty clear from the beginning. It's not a show about who did it, it's not even technically about why, because I don't think it offers many answers why, and actually, I'm glad it doesn't. It's a very contained 4-part story, each episode one take, about the experience and the reality of what can happen. The struggle to understand why, the struggle to process it as a family, as a community, even Jamie himself. Part of that, yeah, is an attempt to understand why, but I don't think it's necessarily providing all the answers so much as grappling with the question. A very good question, because this is a reality. A child who can for all the world appear like a typical, ordinary, sweet kid with loving parents could be capable of murder. It's a horrifying question to sit with, the idea of how well do I know my own kid? Could he be capable of this? For which, I think as a culture we often don't want to sit with that question. We often just settle upon blame. Either just saying, oh, this is all those parents' fault, they're different to us, they're worse, they were terrible, that's it answered, now I don't have to sit with the question. Or we blame the child themselves and call them evil. They're just evil, that's it. You know, job done. And people then make all sorts of deliberately harrowing true crime documentaries about just how evil they are. Which is a point I've addressed in past videos, particularly with the example of Mary Bell. That was a true story of a girl named Mary Bell who murdered 2 boys when she was 11 years old. Hundreds of YouTube videos either declare that she's evil, or they say she was abused, she couldn't help what her parents did to her, they were the evil ones, not her, and no, I made a video to take a more nuanced approach about that situation and say neither of those extremes are the point. It's not about evil or innocent, it's not about blame, it's about sitting with the reality in order to start trying to understand what can be done as a society to prevent it happening again. Blame and easy answers don't fix anything. First we have to sit with the weight, and this show does a brilliant job of making you sit with the weight. But I'm getting sidetracked. This is a brilliant show, and a lot of you have been telling me in the comments to hurry up and watch it. I'm very behind everyone. I'm a children's therapist. I wasn't really sure why people were so eager until I got to episode 3, an entire 52-minute episode of a clinical psychologist assessing Jamie. I can see why you all kept commenting now. I've made videos in the past breaking down every moment, every line of different therapy scenes from fiction. This episode is so long, I don't think we can talk about every single moment. At least not in a single video, so I've decided just to focus on a few specific points around a single theme here, exploring the biggest thing that goes wrong in this session, why it goes wrong, what it tells us about making assessments, about how accurate or not this depiction is, and even what it tells us about therapy as a whole. Are you ready? It's probably going to be quite a long one, this. So we open with Bryony, played by Erin Doherty, entering the Secure Training Centre, which is for kids between like 12 and 17, I think, in the UK. It's where Jamie has currently been placed prior to his trial, and we have 2 people providing an assessment on Jamie for the court. We don't really learn much about the other person because that's not our perspective, and when this guard tells Bryony that the other psychologist only had 3 sessions with Jamie...
The other one of you, he only needed 3. So...
You can't say anymore. It's important I don't know anything about what the other psychologist says, does, or thinks.
So yes, this is of course for the sake of the court. She's on her 5th session, and we're highlighting that because it's really important context. One, that she has to be careful that her independence here can't be questioned, because that might compromise the reliability of a report. We should remember that for later. There's certain things she can't know and shouldn't say. And also the context that they've had 4 sessions before this, where a lot of the work may already have been achieved. I would imagine a lot of building rapport has taken place, and of course, the other important context, and I should stress this one clearly, this is not therapy. This is an assessment for the sake of making a report for Jamie's trial. Whilst there are certain similarities to therapy, its purpose and therefore some of its approach will be different. I think I've seen a lot of people judging Bryony here as though this is what therapy looks like. No, it's a bit different. We will get into that more later on. Just keep it in mind for now. The first thing we really need to talk about is this.
I need to get a hot chocolate from the machine.
Bryony brings Jamie a hot chocolate to have for their session. Based on a few things this slightly creepy guard later says, we can infer she has brought him hot chocolates before. I don't know how this arrangement came to be, but it is very interesting. Even more so, she's brought her own Tupperware full of marshmallows to add to this drink. This is something she hasn't done before, as the guard mentions.
You must be in business. Never done them before?
And when Jamie receives the hot chocolate, it was clear he asked for this.
You remembered. Thank you.
We can infer some kind of previous situation where Jamie must have said, next time can you bring marshmallows or sprinkles for my hot chocolate, and she agreed. This is super interesting, and something I think in any work like this, certainly in my own therapy work, any situation of gift giving, as it can be called, is something to be very careful with and to think very carefully about. A lot of trainings will say absolutely never give them gifts at all and absolutely never accept gifts from them, and generally it's because that kind of seemingly innocent dynamic might start to steer a relationship into something not less healthy necessarily, but less therapeutic. What the therapist, or in this case a clinical psychologist, means to the client is to the client. That's a very specific relationship. That's unlike most ordinary runs you'll encounter, because you've got a very specific role. Giving someone a hot chocolate might be a very ordinary thing in the ordinary world, but therapy and this kind of work is a bit different. So it could potentially skew the therapeutic aspects of their relationship, and secondly, it could muddy your perception of the client. We'll see it do exactly that between Bryony and Jamie in this episode, so I won't over-explain too much right now. It's just to say that there are reasons a lot of trainings might suggest you never engage in this stuff. I think, particularly in actual therapy, there are times where it is okay. You've just got to be clear about the purpose and aware of the effect it might have in case it does need addressing or talking about. For example, often when I finish work altogether with a kid, I might give him a goodbye card that I've written, and sometimes I even let them choose one object or toy from the room that they can take home to keep permanently, like just one of the toy animals or something. There's a lot of caveats to that idea, but it can be positive. It can serve like a transitional object for the kids. It can be a symbol of what the work meant that they can hold on to. It can make them feel less like I'm just going to immediately forget them the second our sessions are over, which can help them to internalize many of the positives of a work and the experience of a more positive ending with better closure. I don't think I've ever made a kid hot chocolate before, but I've never had a room where that was possible to do. I think if you had the facilities in the therapy room or just outside, it does make a lot more sense. Where, for example, me like bringing a hot chocolate from home or one I'd bought from a shop on the way, I think that would be stranger. That would make it more like a gift. I know one of the schools my supervisor works at has its own little like building, the hut for the wellbeing centre, and they have a hot chocolate machine in there, and every break and lunchtime certain kids will come up asking for a hot chocolate, and she realised very early on it wasn't really about the hot chocolate. What they were wanting was to be invited in and to find some care, you know, symbolically. I think the idea of a warm chocolate drink suits that. So in that sense, I think it can be okay. It's a considerate, ordinary human thing to do. I mean, it's simple as that, really. You got to be human in your work and you've got to make a connection. I think the positives here are that it probably relaxes Jamie, makes him less defensive and more open to talking, and when you've got to make an assessment here where you might not have that many sessions, I'm pretty sure you won't always be permitted or have the time in terms of deadlines for 5 sessions to make your report, you then might not have the same luxury of time to gradually build rapport. And I think it might help also to frame the session a bit more like a friendly chat. I think this happens more in adult therapy, that the therapist might make a cup of tea for you both before the session starts. However, framing it like a friendly chat can also have drawbacks because it's not a chat. It requires work from both parties. And there is, as I reversed all of this, the danger that being too human puts them off. I think this is more so with adult therapy, but sometimes certain people like a therapist who doesn't feel quite real to them, who feels like some person in a place outside of ordinary reality and time where you can dump all your deepest feelings, and because they don't feel too real, it feels safer to put that stuff there. For some people that's what they like, and if they do then start to feel more of their therapist's humanity, it can kind of put them off a bit. The point I'm making, and you get this a lot with therapy or assessments or any work like this, is that there's rarely a very rigid right or wrong. It's normally this sort of convoluted waffle where there are disadvantages and advantages to all things, and you have to use your sense and your intuition to figure out what fits best in each specific context with each specific client. But there are some things you can be sure about for the advantages, such as the best place to build a website. This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform for you to stand out online. Despite having a YouTube channel, I am not at all tech savvy, and I think Squarespace is a really straightforward option for claiming a domain, building a professional website, growing it, getting paid, all of it happening on the same platform. You sign up, you're given some easy questions to set a clear foundation for how your website might look, which is nice, and then all the freedom in the world to tweak and refine it afterwards. Here's me starting work on a website to sell my stories and to offer my editing services. I love how you can just drag around these blocks. Easy to move blocks that can keep things perfectly aligned. It makes it simple to pop in new stuff, like even making a contact form. You just select it, and then look how easy it is to add new boxes here and to customize them. Add extra pages, such as a shop for my poetry books. This is still a work in progress at the moment, but all of this footage you're seeing was just 30 minutes of first trying out Squarespace with not once looking at any tutorials. They can help you secure the best domain names at an all-inclusive price. They have integrated SEO tools to help your website stand out in search engines, and a load of other stuff that you might like. Do you like? Well, then there's a link in the description and the pinned comment for a free trial to Squarespace. And if you really like, then use the code MyLittleThoughtTree for 10% off purchasing your domain and website. Give it a go if that's your thing. Squarespace. And then I think the reverse situation, the client bringing you gifts, that can be more complicated, especially so with kids. When I did work in schools, there was this kid who had like food tech lessons the same day as our sessions, and she started wanting to bring in what she'd baked in lessons as a gift to me, like, here's this chocolate crunch I've made, what do you think of it? And no, it's important to talk about it. That's a situation where you don't want their kindness to feel rejected, but you do need to discuss why she wants to give it to you, what the good and bad of doing that would be like, and enforce a boundary about it. Which is generally, I think, how I navigate these sort of situations with a kid. Obviously, it's not always the case, but a kind of, oh, you want me to start bringing you a hot chocolate for each session? Okay, well, let's think about that. What would be good about that setup, but let's also try and imagine why it might be bad, what problems this might cause. And in a way, that's this video, exploring the problems it causes. She's not just getting a hot chocolate, she's not just bringing in marshmallows from home, she's also, as well, adding in something extra that he didn't request.
And I saved you half my sandwich in case you were hungry.
A sandwich she made herself as well. She puts time and care into creating this thing that she's now giving to Jamie. Symbolically, that could be quite big, right? And you can say, well, it's not specifically for him, this was her sandwich, she's just chosen to share half. But in a way, that's even more personal. I'm now giving you half of something I've eaten, something that was for me is now yours. Generally, I don't know why she would do this. I imagine Jamie is well fed in the training centre. I don't see what benefit this adds that the hot chocolate doesn't already achieve. I think giving him half her sandwich is an odd thing to do. I don't want to confuse this. Rapport building is obviously good. It's important in any work like this. Otherwise they will be more defensive and withdrawn, and it'll be really hard to get as accurate a picture of Jamie for the court. Or if it's therapy, it will be harder to help them grow. And sometimes rapport can be all a session is about, even in an assessment, I think. Here we get a bit of joking around at the start where they talk about food. Jamie teases her about calling bread bread instead of a slice.
Slice of what? Bread. You're posh, aren't you? No, I'm just not from where you're from. What do you call bread?
Stuff she responds to quite well, by the way, if you don't mind me dropping into a tangent for a moment here.
You're posh.
If it makes you happy that I am, Jamie, then
What
I
do you
am.
call your granddad? Bet you call him Grandpa.
Rather than taking it like an accusation or a criticism, she responds playfully, like it's all just friendly teasing. Which I think it mostly is, but this could also be a chance for Jamie to jab at a potential insecurity of Bryony's. However, no, she's perfectly secure. She at first says, no, I'm not posh, I'm just not where you're from. But when he insists again that she is, there's no need for her to insist otherwise or to defend herself. If it makes you happy that I am Jamie, then I am. Said, crucially, not in a passive-aggressive way. And then when he accuses her of calling her granddad grandpa because he thinks that's what a posh person would do, she is very open, almost making a self-deprecating joke by leaning into his assumption.
I do not.
I bet you do.
I call him Pop Pop.
What? Do you?
Yes, I do.
Wow.
It's also very honest and authentic, by the way. It's just a sweet, playful moment, and if this was therapy, it would be good to build upon. I would wonder if this is Jamie subconsciously testing out how you handle feelings of insecurity or of being teased, something we do know happens to him. Maybe he's also seeing if he can gain some power over you through this, based on his behaviour at other points in this session. I think that could be true. But responding like this and demonstrating a positive, open, friendly way of handling it that strengthens their connection, that's something he then experiences, that he can potentially learn from and internalise for himself, maintaining a boundary without confrontation and with total security. I once worked with a kid around the same age as this who used to find any possible insecurity to pick at me over. The early sessions would just be a total barrage of insults, and there wasn't anything playful about it. He wanted to insult me, he wanted me to be hurt and to get fed up and to kick him out so that he didn't have to attend therapy anymore. But it was all about handling that and containing it, and slowly, not only did it start to become a more friendly teasing, but it became something that built connection between us. There's also this later moment between
We
them.
went to Tenerife with them once.
On holiday.
No, banana picking. Obviously it was on holiday.
Okay.
You know, this is a really obvious point for me to be making. It's not anything that special. This is basically just ordinary good-natured taking the piss as an act of endearment. I think it's a very British thing as well. But this is the 5th session. We don't know it was always this good-natured. And we do know Jamie does later seek to exert some power over Bryony, and even then, I think a lot of people might just react badly to Jamie here. Might get defensive when he hits you with that sarcasm. So it is an obvious point, but it's still important that Bryony can respond playfully without it being a defensive manoeuvre.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone use banana picking in a...
How a source of potential confrontation becomes rapport building. All of that tangent though was just to say that rapport building matters, and I can understand some logic to the hot chocolate if there's a machine outside and Jamie has asked for it. Bringing a sandwich... The only potential benefit I can think of is Bryony wants to see how Jamie responds to this, throwing in this odd bit of behaviour to analyse what it can reveal about Jamie and their dynamic. It's worth saying clients are not springboards or toys to play around with and their feelings. They are human beings, no matter what they've done. And obviously you might lead things in certain directions for the sake of psychoanalysis, and you might come with a list of questions, or you might go like, today I was thinking we could draw a picture of a house, or whatever other similar activity you think might get an insight into them. Doing that kind of stuff makes sense, but choosing to behave in an odd manner to do with the personal relationship between you in order to try and provoke some kind of response you can analyse and see how it changes the dynamic, I think that has the potential to be something really unethical. It's likely true in an assessment like this that the psychologist might be more forward with their questions or provoke them a bit more, but bringing a sandwich for this reason would be bad in my opinion. The whole reason I'm saying that though is because we do learn something that we could analyse.
Did you make it?
Yes.
Well, your mate brought you, dear.
What, you think that's weird?
No. My mum makes them.
Wow, that makes 2 of us then.
Is he now seeing his dynamic with Bryony a bit like a mother and son? Is Jamie wanting care and comfort from her? Providing food can be a little symbolic for nourishment and nurturing, and look how chuffed he looks about the sandwich. Even though he doesn't actually want the sandwich, it's got pickle and he doesn't like pickle. Even then, he still takes the sandwich, and not out of politeness, because he makes it clear to her that he doesn't like pickle, but he does want what this sandwich seems to mean in this moment moment. Jamie appreciates feeling cared for, considered, nurtured maybe. Is this how Jamie sees women? Do they exist to provide comfort and care and acceptance? Is that what he feels they're supposed to do? A little bit of a stretch to just conclude that from this one exchange, isn't it? But it's a good question to wonder about. There's a thing called countertransference. I think generally people have heard of projection and transference, the idea that you see people in certain ways that are partly warped by your internal world, by your own inner feelings. If I start work with a kid and he expects me to get super angry every time he accidentally spills some paint or whatever, that's not because I've seemed like an angry person. I don't think I come across that way, but that's stuff from his brain to do with his past experiences that he is then projecting onto me, seeing me like an angry person even though I might not be. Well, countertransference is like a step further. Not only do they see you in ways partly formed from their own feelings and expectations, but they also subconsciously pressure you into playing a certain role, pressure you into feeling a certain way that aligns with it. If Jamie expects women to behave like a nurturing maternal sort of figure to him, has he been subconsciously steering Bryony into feeling like one, and then into behaving that way as well, to end up in this weird dynamic where you're bringing him sandwiches and being compared to his mum? It's for this reason that certain types of therapists and psychologists are trained to be a bit of a blank slate, not pour too much of their own personality into the sessions in order that you can more clearly see what the client is pouring into the dynamic. If I'm not contributing too much of my personal self, if I then end up doing something very weird in a session, it's more easy for me to go, oh, hang on, what does this mean? Is this something from the client that's got me behaving this way? Is this something I can analyse and something we can explore? Which does happen. I remember a certain kid's session where I would always start to feel incredibly sleepy during their sessions. No matter how wide awake I was before or after, no matter if I downed a coffee or the session was a fun one, I would always just feel really, really sleepy, and that sleepiness meant something. Or there was one kid where, in little ways, nothing crazy obviously, but I found myself behaving a bit like he was a friend, like a mate, like we were both two kids having a laugh. Whoa, what's that feeling about? You have to have great self-awareness for this kind of stuff, not just so that you can understand the sometimes crazy dynamics that occur, but also in order to make sure you don't get pulled too far into them, to make sure that you can safely step back and steer things into something more therapeutic again. It's perhaps no coincidence moments after this, Jamie also compares Bryony to his granny.
You sound like a granny.
Do I?
Oh, you got your colour back. You can't have been that ill.
Now, again, this might mean nothing, but it is the sort of thing you might think about and wonder about. Twice in the first few minutes, he is comparing Bryony to a maternal figure, to his mum, and he doesn't say my granny, he says a granny in general, but his perception of a granny is largely built out of his experiences with his own nan, and I'm sure both his mum and his nan are a lot of different things and behave in a lot of different ways, but there's two specific points Jamie is drawing out in these examples. Again, all of this might mean nothing, but you do have to consider the stuff that your clients bring up. One of these voices here is a mum who is nurturing and caring and offers you food. The other is a nan who sounds dismissive of Jamie's feelings. When he's ill or hurt, she doesn't provide comfort, she invalidates it. Is that interesting? Potentially. A good female figure who provides care and comfort, and a bad one who doesn't take you seriously, or your pain seriously. Jamie murdered a girl who was older than him. A girl he hoped to go out with and be accepted by, only she rejected and mocked him and didn't take him seriously. It could be worth asking him about this stuff in a less direct manner. He does an impression of a granny. Oh, is that what your nan sounds like? How's it feel when she says that? What does she say it in response to? Or in the same way, Bryony later asks questions about what being a man means. She could ask, what does being a woman mean? Are they supposed to provide care? How does it feel when they don't do that? This idea comes back round later in the session as well. Jamie talks about how he regularly gets out of sports lessons by feigning illness.
Not good at much, but I'm really good at getting out of PE.
And there was that voice earlier popping up in his world that says, can't have been that ill. Are these two things connected? Maybe. We're jumping ahead a little bit, but Jamie, who feels a man should be good at sports, who feels his dad wants him to be good at them, Jamie isn't good at them and doesn't like them and tries to wriggle his way out of it by expressing hurt and seeking care. Seeking someone to go, "Oh no, you poor thing, you can sit this one out." Or go to the medical room, we'll call your parents or your grandparents to collect you if your parents are working. Someone who wants empathy and concern, and in this example is instead met with dismissal. How does that then feel? Especially if you feel men are supposed to be good at sports, and now your nan is suggesting you were trying to weasel out of them? Maybe that makes him feel weak. Pathetic. He later uses the word ashamed. I mean, potentially. It's worth keeping in mind I'm not saying his nan is always like this. She might be a very positive figure in his life and he might know that. But there is one specific thing about her or a specific idea from his internal world that feels quite important. That's the bit we're drilling down into, not the reality of everything around it. Either way, this is still a hell of a lot of tenuous conjecture on my part, based on what we know Jamie did, and I could be completely wrong with all of that. You absolutely cannot jump to conclusions about the people you work with. But the point was, this is the kind of thing you might wonder about in that moment. You might want to steer the conversation in that direction to ask what Jamie thinks, to see if you were on the right lines or not. And the thing is, there's barely any discussion about what Jamie feels about women. Bryony's focus is always on talking about what a man means to Jamie. She, at one point, suggests that they did talk about his mum last time, so I imagine the topic of femininity might be something they've already covered, in which case it's even less likely she made him this sandwich as some deliberate point to analyse something. As a result, I can only conclude this is the countertransference getting the best of her. Feeling this subconscious pull to behave like his mum, to see him like a child that she wants to nurture and wants to give a sandwich to. Perhaps that led her into making him a sandwich and not reflecting on it any further. Or at least to have made herself a sandwich, eaten half of it and then gone, I don't fancy the rest right now. I know, maybe I'll save it and give it to Jamie. I wonder if he'll like that. That could be a nice thing for me to do. And then to have planned that enough in advance that she immediately springs the sandwich on him when she enters the session. I think this is probably a powerful countertransference that Bryony has failed to notice herself falling into. Something very, very intense here that's got a feeling like she wants to, I don't know, wrap him up in wool, give him a hot chocolate, bring him a sandwich. If that is something they've deliberately written into the scene, I think it's very clever of them. Either way, twice the sandwich comes up in conversation, and not once is Bryony addressing or exploring the dynamic to understand it here.
You're not going to try the sandwich?
She asks, and he tells her he hates pickle.
Hate it? God, I really messed up then.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Like, that's a good response. She's not going overboard apologising, not making a fuss about it. It's just, yeah, I messed up. I accept and I recognise that. It's okay. But they then don't talk anymore about it. So why bring it up at all then? Why ask why he's not eating the sandwich? There's no, what is it like that I've messed up for you? Or does your mum get your sandwiches wrong sometimes? How does that feel? No sort of exploring how Jamie responds when he feels let down. Or I think if I'd ended up in a weird situation where I was bringing sandwiches for a client, I'd at the very least say, does this feel weird, me giving you this? That in itself isn't a bad question. It's quite open-ended. You can say it with a little bit of humour. And if they respond yes, you can go, oh, in what way? And open up that door to discussion. I think the lack of discussion about this is a problem because it means whatever feelings it might conjure up, whatever stuff might be going on here for Jamie is going unacknowledged, which means it might more subconsciously start to affect the session in other ways. Which, again, yes, we will get to. We're getting there. In fact, we're probably there now. Let's talk about it now. Here's the first sign of things going wrong. Bryony asks Jamie what being a man feels like, what masculinity is. And when his response is vague, she offers a few suggestions to get him thinking.
When I hear the word masculine, I think they can mend things. They like to make things. They like sports. They like going to the pub.
She then tries to press a bit further, but something interesting happens.
Masculine.
This all started because I said you sounded like a granny.
What?
Jamie points out that in their earlier sessions her questions were more direct and rigid. I imagine that means just going through a lot of the stuff she needs to assess, where now she's trying to understand his internal world a bit more, so it is more free-flowing, and he's now suspicious of that.
Now you're just chatting shit. Now you're, what do you call bread? Come on. It just feels like a trick.
Trick? Trick into what?
Now, on the surface, this is a very straightforward moment. Other sessions you asked rigid questions, now we're having a friendly chat. This is odd. Yes, it probably would feel that way. And it perhaps suggests maybe not as much rapport building had gone on in past sessions as I imagined. It therefore feels like a trick. Makes sense. A trick into what?
My dad's okay.
Jamie doesn't want to talk about his dad and is suspicious she's asking about him. When she later asks about her dad's anger, Jamie stresses that his dad has never hit him.
He's never hit me.
Jamie is suspicious this seemingly friendly chat is a trick to try and label his dad as abusive. Okay, that makes sense. And Bryony does a very good job with this suspicion that I could talk about in another video. Bryony does a great job of explaining why she's asking about his dad, why they're now having this in a more conversation way than they have done in other sessions. She does that in a really clever and effective way that then helps Jamie to talk about his dad, to lower some of his defences there. It's very good. But it's not the focus today, because there's a deeper layer to this. Think about it. Why would Jamie imagine Bryony is trying to see if his dad is abusive? Okay, on the one hand, it might just be because that's a kind of stigma about therapy work. Sure, but I think the answer is the same thing the detective wondered about in episode 1.
You worried about the dad? I had this old case once, right? Young boy. Put it this way. It took us months before we realised what the dad was doing to him, so...
It's kind of cheating, but I think that parallel in the episodes tells us this is what the writers were thinking. Jamie thinks Bryony is trying to check whether his dad is abusive, which she's not doing, let's be clear, but he worries she is, because he thinks that might be a reason to explain what Jamie did. An answer to the murder, a person to blame. But why should anyone need blaming for anything unless Jamie did murder Katie? Something he's so far been denying. It's quite a big point in that regard. On the surface, this is about not wanting his dad to be wrongly accused of abuse. Underneath, this is also about Jamie worrying that Bryony thinks he is guilty. Is it any coincidence his next question after this is to see her notes?
Can I see your notes?
What does Bryony think of me? Jamie is suddenly very worried what she thinks, and very worried what she'll tell the judge. And within that context, yeah, all of the friendliness might feel like a trick. She seemed friendly, but does she actually like me? Maybe she's even trying to trick him into accidentally confessing, trying to put words in his mouth. But then I think it goes even deeper and more personal than that too. Because if this is all a trick, it's not, but let's consider this hypothetically from Jamie's point of view. If all of the friendliness is a trick, what else does that mean? Does it mean the time she laughed at his jokes? Was that just pretending to laugh in order to get him talking? If the friendly chat is a trick, then maybe all of the friendliness is. Maybe getting him a hot chocolate, offering him a sandwich, maybe that was all false. As opposed to the alternative explanation, the thing Jamie might have been hoping, that Bryony did this stuff and is being so friendly just because she wanted to be kind to him. Just because Bryony likes him. I think Jamie is hoping that Bryony likes him, and if you've seen the episode, you'll know that fact becomes pretty obvious by the end. The hope she likes me, the fear it's all a trick to get something from me. The hope I'm someone she can accept, the fear I'm someone she's using like a toy, a piece to manipulate. This is where Jamie's internal world becomes important again. Countertransference wise, there are two basic things we can note in this session. One is Jamie seeing Bryony like a mother figure. Yes, we've mentioned that already, but I want to draw attention to the potential power dynamics within it. When Bryony gets Jamie his hot chocolate, he thanks her.
You remembered. Thank you.
And this might be me. I also wouldn't normally read this much into the minutiae of a child actor's performance, but Owen Cooper is brilliant all throughout this, so I am going to raise it. I don't think Jamie feels touched that she got him this. I don't think it hits his heart, or that he's really grateful exactly for the hot chocolate with sprinkles and marshmallows. I think instead his tone and expressions suggest a little hit of satisfaction, power. I got her to do something I wanted. That was smart of me, or strong of me. I was dominant there. I can manipulate her. I mean, that was the point he made about feigning illness in sports, right? He was looking for some comfort and concern, someone to say, oh, you poor thing, sit this one out. But there was a proud smile about it, bragging about how he's able to lie and feign illness, to trick them.
I'm really good at getting out of pain. Headaches, hurt my leg, funny tummy.
Extracting and manipulating care and sympathy from someone to get something he wants. Doing that makes him feel smart and powerful about a thing where he normally feels weak, which is sport. And what's the thing Jamie tells us about Katie this session? That someone Katie went out with had shared a nude picture of her with the rest of the school. She was, I should think, traumatised by the experience, but rather than empathy in this story, Jamie describes it as an opportunity to ask her out.
Everyone was calling her a slag, you know, or flat or whatever, so I thought when she was like that weak, she might like me. It's clever, don't you think?
He sees this experience with the picture as one that brands her less desirable or less valuable somehow, and therefore he can take advantage of that to secure a date he might not ordinarily get. He describes it as smart. Same kind of emotion here, right? I can't imagine Katie would ever say yes in that situation. If I was her, I'd be thinking, A, Jesus Christ, this is not the time for me to think about opening up to someone new, and B, Jesus Christ, your underlying hope and your lack of empathy is very apparent here. But if she had said yes, he would likely be feeling this same sort of thing. Pride. Look at what I managed to get her to do on my behalf. Look how I tricked her. I am smart. Which is perhaps the most damning thing about this whole manosphere approach to dating. One, the idea that you would need to half-trick people to secure a date in the first place. And don't get me wrong on this point either. I know full well just how difficult it can be to find a partner, and I don't want to minimise that idea. I'm sure half the issue that leads people down the path of the red pill is that a lot of society does minimise this idea and tells people it's supposed to be easy, and so when it then isn't, they start looking elsewhere for answers. So no, I don't think it is easy in the sense that finding someone who genuinely suits you as a person can be quite difficult. You want someone who's as weird as you are, and where you don't feel a burning pressure to impress them, because instead the focus just becomes, oh, I'm actually having a nice time just talking to them. That's not going to be every person you encounter. That's not easy, but going down the path of trying to manipulate people makes it far more likely to alienate potential very good matches than it does attract someone you fear might otherwise have been uninterested. So, that point, yes, and two, if you do then secure a date, the feeling isn't acceptance, connection, belonging, feeling like you matter as a person. You don't want that sort of vulnerability to all be walled off in place of pride, a tap to the ego, to be left where all you get to feel is, I was smart, I did a clever job convincing her. Because how is that ever going to feel like acceptance? Either way, is there an idea here that women and Bryony should be caring to me being Jamie, not because it's connection or because it's human or that I am a lovable person, but that's what they should be doing. That's their function in society. When they are doing that, I sort of feel good, but mainly just powerful and in control. And when they're not doing that, they're doing something wrong and it frustrates me. Take this moment. It happens twice in the session. Jamie explains how his dad used to look away when he did bad in football matches. Bryony asks why he thinks his dad did that, and Jamie says it's because his dad didn't want Jamie to see how ashamed his dad was.
How did you feel when you saw that shame?
You're supposed to say he wasn't. He's supposed to say, oh, but he wasn't ashamed. But he just thought that, Jamie. Oh, but is that what you really think? He wouldn't be ashamed. Not of his kid.
We shouldn't read too much into this, because I think it's understandable that he would not quite get what Bryony is doing here. Her job is to look at how he felt, to focus on that bit, not on empty reassurance that might even invalidate his feelings. I also don't think she words this the best. However, it does happen twice, and even if you don't understand this in Jamie's position, it doesn't necessarily merit such a strong reaction from him. Even stronger the second time, so does it mean something more?
How does that make you feel?
Aren't you supposed to say I'm not ugly? You don't think you're pretty. You do think I'm ugly.
I haven't passed judgment on either of those things.
Bryony is supposed to comfort me. When she doesn't do that, I feel frustrated with her. It is her fault for not doing that. I am justified to be angry with her. She's supposed to be accepting and comforting. So that's one dynamic. The other one, here's a few examples. When Bryony suggests that she was also bad at sports, Jamie calls her pretty.
You're good at other stuff though, weren't you?
Why do you think that?
You look like you were and you're clever, so...
When Bryony asks him how he feels about the belief that he's ugly...
How would you feel? You don't know. You're not. You're pretty.
When Bryony asks him if he was attracted to Katie...
She wasn't my type. She was quite... No offence, quite flat, you know.
The addition there of no offence, suggesting that he thinks Bryony is also flat-chested, that he has looked and considered that about her, and of course it's also making a link between her and Katie. Yeah, we could also look a lot more at the power dynamics in all of these moments of Jamie trying to assert a level of dominance and how that informs both of these transferences about Bryony as a caring maternal presence and Bryony as a sexual object he is both jealous of and desires. But look, this video isn't an analysis of Jamie. We could drill down into these things a lot more and pull up loads of other interesting moments. That would have to be an entirely different video. This one is about the work Bryony provides itself. The point I've been building towards is that all of this stuff ties back to the need and desire for Bryony to like him, whether that's romantically, sexually, for the sake of feeling powerful, for the sake of comfort and acceptance, for the sake of ordinary friendship. Being liked by her feels important to him, and either she likes me, again, not necessarily romantically, but she likes talking to me, or this is all a trick. This is her manipulating him, toying with him to get what she wants, while he's then left feeling powerless and worthless and angry. I've described that like it's fact. This is all to do with Jamie's internal world and his projections. Stuff that makes Jamie very susceptible should Bryony do anything that, I don't know, might make him feel like there's a more personal bond than one of a client and psychologist. See where I'm going with this? If this idea does reflect a lot from Jamie's internal world, and we can see why he might very readily and intensely hope that Bryony likes him on a personal level, it's also then an idea Bryony herself has fed into by bringing him hot chocolate with her own marshmallows and giving him a sandwich she has made, and also by then not addressing that situation. Jamie hopes this stuff means that she likes him. Is this then not also part of why it stings so much when she doesn't reassure him that he's not ugly? What would it have meant if she had reassured him? If she'd said, no, you're not ugly? Would there be a bit of Jamie, a bit of emotion there, thinking, oh, does that mean she likes me? Does that mean she thinks I'm attractive? And so, when we get to the end of the episode and Bryony suddenly tells him that this is the final session, Jamie feels betrayed, tricked. He feels the desperate need to ask now,
do you like me?
You know, look at the contrast here. This is a session that begins with Bryony making sandwiches for him and then suddenly ends with her saying, this is the final session, we are done now. Not even like, we're gonna finish in 10 minutes or whatever. She just wraps it up as soon as she tells him that.
Take what I said seriously. Thanks for your time. I'll ask Frank to come back in now.
Thanks for my time!
The contrast between the two extremes of how this session begins and ends with no chance to talk about that stuff. Of course it's going to be confusing for Jamie. I would imagine Jamie now feels that they're ending in this moment because she doesn't like him, because she's gotten fed up with him. Or else she's manipulated everything she wants and now she can discard him. And with everything we know about Jamie, he will feel that very intensely.
So it doesn't seem like a proper goodbye.
It is.
It doesn't seem like one.
On this point, I think Jamie is correct. I think suddenly announcing it's the end and then calling Frank the guard here to come in and take Jamie away, I think the abruptness of this is a bit unethical. I don't like it. I'm not going to criticise Bryony for failing to answer if she likes Jamie, however.
I was here as a professional, Jamie.
Don't you think like that, then?
My job was to assess
Because I like you.
as a professional.
I might be wrong, but I'm not sure she can answer that. I think it might jeopardise her report if she's appearing to personally like Jamie. I think even if she does like him, she can't admit to that, and I think she does attempt her best to explain the situation. To say, look, because we're ending, it's nothing you've done wrong, it's no judgment on how I feel about you. I was here as a professional to do a job, and now that job just has been concluded. That's why we're finishing. I think that's what Bryony's attempting to say, but she's so blindsided by the question, and Jamie is so desperate for a clearer answer that she struggles to explain.
Don't you even like me a bit? What did you think about me then? Decide, come on!
And to be clear, in therapy, this can be different. A lot of trainings will teach you to not reveal too much about yourself, and to sort of dodge this question, but also zero in on the important bit. Which means responding to this question with a question of your own, a kind of, what makes that feel important to you type thing. Although even that sounds quite a cold way of phrasing it, actually. But digging down into the meaning of that question, rather than just validating or reassuring. However, in general, I don't think answering is always a bad thing. I think it depends on the context. I've told this story in one of my other videos, but in my very earliest work, when I was super young, I worked with a kid who was chaotic, let's say. A really full-on first client to have, and the day the work really started to progress was the day it just popped into my head to say to him, you know, I like you, right? You know, I like spending time with you. And he was like, no, you don't. Have you not thought that I do? No, you don't like me. And he was like clogging up a sink with tissue at the time, or doing something a bit destructive that he sort of pointed to kind of say, look how bad I am, of course you don't like me. And I can't remember the exact exchange, but I asked him, when you do these things that a lot of people would see as bad, and I don't stop you doing that, is that because I'm not strong enough to stop you? Which was a point we'd touched on before, that he felt his mum isn't strong enough to stop him doing things. Is it because I'm not strong enough, or maybe there's another reason? Maybe sometimes it can be okay to destroy a few things so long as it's safe, or to be a bit of a whirlwind. Maybe I don't stop you doing those things because I think in doing them you're trying to tell me something really important, something I want to listen to. And I don't think he entirely understood what I was getting at then, but the idea then did come around again in the session, or maybe a later session. He then did start to understand the idea, and that was kind of a big shift in our work. In that context, telling him I liked him was a good thing to do. It was also very honest and authentic, by the way. But if you were seeing Jamie for a therapy session instead of an assessment, I think it might feel good for you to tell him you liked him, but on its own it wouldn't amount to much, and it could also potentially harm things. It might just be a tap to his ego. It might fuel his hope for something romantic. Again, he was probably partly hoping she told him he wasn't ugly because he's hoping she's attracted to him. And by reverse, you don't want him to believe he is ugly. By not answering, you might be contributing to a negative view of himself. You know, reassurance might just be reassurance. That's hardly going to change a person, and it might have some dangers, but it's still a pretty good thing, I think. So I would imagine Jamie asking that question in the normal confines of therapy. That answering wouldn't be the worst response on its own, but it is also part of this bigger dynamic around attraction and being liked that does need addressing, and it's just much better to really ask him about it and drill down into what his hopes and fears are between you and him, to start discussing and exploring the dynamics. You could do both things. Again, this isn't therapy, but it's still a problem, and it still contributes to Jamie feeling very hurt at the end of this.
Oh, don't you even like me a bit?
Jamie, come on, man, please. Okay? Jamie.
What did you think about me then?
Okay.
It's not fair to play around with a client's internal worlds. No matter what they've done, they are still a human who deserves ethical treatment. Bryony has not intended to play with his emotions, but I think she has contributed to a dynamic, giving him expectations that she then very abruptly pulls away from. But it's brilliant writing, and again, I'm not even going to say this is badly characterising a psychologist or it's an inaccurate depiction, because I think they've done a great job to write in motivations for why this happens. Firstly, I've discussed some of the reason behind her giving him a sandwich isn't because she's bad at her job. There's probably a very powerful countertransference, so powerful she hasn't really picked up on it, that has led her to giving him a sandwich. And then secondly, there's an arc of sorts here in terms of the abrupt ending. I think if we run it back a bit, we see Bryony really starts to become overwhelmed in this session.
You think she's a bitch, right? Doing all that. You think she's a bullying bitch.
I think what's most painful about these kind of moments is that we never see the story from Katie's point of view. She's never a perspective in this show. Jamie then starts explaining that night when she was killed.
I could have touched her, but I didn't. I had a knife. She was scared, but I didn't do that. I could have touched any part of her body I wanted to. I really wanted to, but I didn't. Most boys would have touched her.
We see Bryony freezing up here. When Jamie finishes talking, it takes her a long time to find a response because it's quite disturbing and shocking. He's just said all of this, and nowhere in any of it is there a hint of empathy or remorse for the fact Katie is dead, just that I could have killed her and touched her. I had that power over her, but I didn't do it. Playing about with the idea of power whilst also fantasizing your innocence and morality. It makes me think back to a moment earlier in the session where he makes Bryony flinch, where he could have hit her. He shows her he could have hit her, but he doesn't, and to him that makes her fear amusing.
Did I scare you when I shouted?
She wrote this on your
I mean, I'm only 13. I don't think I look that scary.
Could you tell me what these emojis
Oh,
are?
how embarrassing is that? Getting scared of a 13-year-old.
I think there's something in the transference here that makes Bryony relate very, very strongly to Katie. And I think that feeling and the terror of it hits her like a train. Perhaps even doubly so if she had previously been feeling like he was a child to be maternal to. If she had a strong impression of that, and then suddenly it flips into this. It's after saying all of this, while Bryony is still left speechless, that Jamie chooses to eat a bit of a sandwich, which I now wonder if that feels less like a maternal type gift from a loving parent to him, then it feels like a part of Bryony, something of hers that he is taking and biting. That might be a stretch, but either way, Bryony freezes up. And when she does speak, it seems like she wants to get everything wrapped up as quickly as she possibly can so that she can leave. She very bluntly drills him to confirm that he understands what death is, and then she tells him this is the end, and signals for Frank to escort Jamie away. It's not a great thing to do, but I think Bryony is struggling to hold it together and doing her absolute best to finish the session before she breaks down, as we see she then does. It is a little unethical in that sense, but we should also have total empathy for Bryony here. I do not think it's any fault of hers that she gets overwhelmed. You know, I think therapists can have a tendency to beat themselves up about these kind of moments, a sort of, I shouldn't feel that, I'm supposed to be perfectly stable and strong. But you're not a robot. No therapist or psychologist or anyone is without emotion. If they were, they would be bad at their job. You can't just not ever get overwhelmed, you know? It's not good or bad to feel disturbed or overwhelmed or whatever else. It's just human. We feel what we feel, and we can't bury that. We shouldn't shame ourselves, but we can be aware of it so that the feelings don't cloud our judgment or our behaviours, in order that we can try to manage it as best as possible. So it's absolutely zero mark against Bryony that she struggles, and we should not judge from the outside when she's the one sitting there. She's the one taking on the full intensity of all of Jamie's feelings and his internal world. From her position, this would all be incredibly, incredibly powerful. Earlier in the session, when Jamie first threatened her, Bryony took a moment to step out of the room and recover. And again, you could say, oh, she shouldn't do that, she should be stronger, she should stay in the session. But no, I think it's very sensible. It's not ideal that she steps out of the session. I think even less ideal in actual therapy, but so much of therapy is like wandering through dark woods, never quite hitting those ideals, you know? The point is your priority has to be yourself and your own safety. In that sense, it's very sensible to step out and to take a moment to recover, rather than struggling on in a way where you're unable to do your best because you feel like you have to stay there, like that's what a good therapist should do. No, the guard has already interrupted in this moment because he heard Jamie shouting. He's asked Bryony if she wants to stop, and she says no, but seizes this as a good and natural chance to make mention of getting a cup of tea. I think, at its best, Bryony would have again stepped out of the room here when she was struggling. Following this silence, Jamie eats a bit of the sandwich and then announces how tired he is. And I think that could be a simple moment to say, okay, let's take a quick break. I'll get you that hot chocolate if that's what she still wants to do. You know, I don't much like the idea of getting a hot chocolate, but she had already said she'd get him another one. Or she could just say she's going to get herself a cup of tea, or say neither and just suggest a break, step out of the room, take whatever time she needs again, and then come back and finish the session in a less abrupt way. Ideally, that's what would have happened. Obviously, it didn't happen, and it's not good, but it's hopefully something Bryony would also learn from in her work. So, is Adolescence Episode 3 an accurate depiction of an assessment? I think so. I don't do assessments myself, so I can't answer that question in great detail, but I do find all of their interactions believable and engaging. I think she asks sensible and important questions. I think there's a lot we could dig down into in a separate video, and I think even the stuff that I don't think Bryony should be doing makes total sense to me. Any of the potential inaccuracies, if you could call them that, feel like there is motivation and reason behind why they happen, rather than it's just the writer misunderstanding how this stuff works, you know? So do I think she's good at her job, as though I'm in any position to evaluate someone's entire ability, and as if that's what a therapist would actually do? Putting that aside momentarily for the sake of a YouTube video, yeah, I think I do. She's not perfect, obviously, and there are other problems with this session. There are things we haven't discussed that I could take issue with, but there are also a lot of great moments as well that we haven't discussed. It's also worth remembering we're not just judging this on how accurate the depiction is or how good Bryony is. This is a TV show. It's got to have narrative progression and rhythm and be genuinely engaging in a way that I'm not always convinced a real assessment would be if there was like some omniscient outside observer. I think the fact an entire episode of nothing but this session can be as accurate as it is here, and Bryony can come across as mostly good as she does, whilst still making for a very engaging episode of television. I think that's really impressive. A wonderful, wonderful show. Now, let me know what you think of this episode or of this video, good or bad. Let me know if you want me to talk more on this subject. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe, maybe even support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee. Otherwise, hopefully see you next time. And as ever, a special thank you goes to Flying Spider, Kellyanne Davidson, Luke Orr, Michael Gallagher, Benry, Joshua C. Follier, and Chad Bramwell. Thank you.